Okay, so let's go over the answer key for reasons to use the imperfect tense. You should have the following three things on page 21 of your packet. Doesn't matter what order, but if you notice, the number 3 is the one that has little bullets that go underneath it because that is what we're going to go into a little more detail with. So the first bullet, you should have habitual actions. So for example, something that was repeated over and over again in the past. Cada lunes yo iba a la casa de mi amiga. Okay, so notice every Monday I used to go. So it's that I used to, it's a repetitive type of action, habitual, meaning that it's a habit, you do it over and over again. So try to remember that word, habitual action. The second one, actions going on for an indefinite period of time. We don't know how long that event was going on for. So if it's an indefinite period of time, meaning no beginning, no specific beginning, no specific end, you're going to use the imperfect tense, and we're going to do some practice with that soon. The last one, number 3, is if it's background of a main action in a story. For example, if it's an action in progress, and I always do this little squiggly line, okay, to show that it was something that was going on, and then perhaps something interrupted it or something else happened. So the action that's in progress, that's going on, that's using the imperfect tense. You then have descriptions, okay? Descriptions are used usually with adjectives. So for example, bonita, like in your pretest, you had to write Cinderella was pretty. So that would be using the imperfect tense because it's an adjective. So La Cenicienta era bonita. You'd need the imperfect for the word or the verb ser. If you're telling time, and I want you to add the word telling time, because if you just think of time, there are other reasons where time may be preterite. So we're going to talk about that soon. So telling time, it was, 5 o'clock. You would say eran las 5 de la noche or de la tarde. So you have to use the imperfect tense with that. Weather, you're giving background information about a story. It was a stormy night. It was very cold. You would use hacía mucho frío. Okay, so you know that weather will be an imperfect use. Emotional states, if you're talking about a person's emotion in the past, how they felt. So for example, the one from the pretest, Cinderella was sad. You would say, estaba triste. Okay, you'd have to use estar, obviously, because we're using an emotion, and then the imperfect of estar because that is a reason for the imperfect. And last but not least, when you tell about your age. So how old were you when this event happened? Oh, I was 3 years old. You would say tenía, because we use tener with giving age, and then you'd say 3 años cuando fui a la escuela por primera vez. So anytime you're telling your age, it's going to be imperfect. So please note these on page 21. Because anytime you see these types of actions or things in a story, you need to make sure that you put them into the imperfect tense. Okay, so let's take a look now for some other little indicators of the imperfect. So let's see if you guys can do this. This is not in your packet, just do it here on the video. So you have to look at the sentence and say, what is the reason for using the imperfect here? Todos los días la Cenicienta limpiaba la casa y hacía todos los quehaceres para sus hermanastras. So as we do this, pause the video, then check your work. So what do you think the reason for this would be? Okay, if you said habitual actions, you would be correct. And if you look, the key word here would be todos los días, every day. And that's why we would make this word and this word in the imperfect. Okay, so repeated actions in the past. Then you have this sentence. Caperucita, Little Red Riding Hood, caminaba a la casa de su abuela cuando de repente un lobo salió del bosque. So what would be the reason for using imperfect for caminaba and preterit for salir? So if you said that the imperfect reason, the caminaba, is the in progress action, you would be correct. So what was happening when something else occurred, when there was an interruption? Well, Little Red Riding Hood was, and this is again that little squiggly, this is the in progress action. She was walking, when all of a sudden, here's your lightning bolt, the interruption. The wolf came out of the forest, okay? So this is two-verb sentence here. One of them is the imperfect, the in progress action. The other one, the salir, is the preterit. That's the interruption. So it has two different tenses, and you have to make sure you realize which one is which. Now, it doesn't matter which one comes first or which one comes second in the sentence, because I could technically say, un lobo salió del bosque mientras Caperucita caminaba a la casa. So don't tell me the reason is because one is first and one is second. You have to say which one is the in progress action, which one is the interruption. Okay. Another great key word here would have been de repente. That signifies that this is the interruption. All of a sudden, something happened. Okay, so this is a really great vocabulary transition word you can use or phrase. Okay, let's go to the next one. Blancanieve era tan blanca como la nieve, sus labios eran tan rojos como una rosa y su pelo era negro. What is the reason for the imperfect here? Okay, hopefully you said descriptions. Yes, you're describing Snow White here, Blancanieve. She was, her skin, her lips, her hair, all of those are descriptions, and that would cause for the imperfect tense. Okay, era, eran, era, which is one of the irregulars that we discussed. Okay, era medianoche cuando Cenicienta perdió su zapato. Why would we use imperfect for era medianoche? Okay, if you said telling time, and I'm going to add that in because I like to have that word in there, because when you tell time in the past, just like this, it was midnight, you have to use the imperfect. Estaba nublado y llovía a cántaros. Hopefully you said weather. Okay, you're giving background information on the story, on the scene, so it should be imperfect. La Cenicienta estaba muy triste cuando las hermanastras le arruinaron el vestido. So what would be the reason for estar here in the imperfect? Okay, hopefully you said emotional states or feelings. How someone was feeling in the past warrants for the imperfect tense for the most part. 7. La Bella Durmiente tenía 16 años cuando se pinchó el dedo. Why are we using the imperfect for tenía 16 años? Okay, hopefully you said age. Whenever you tell someone's age in the past, you should be using the imperfect tense. Okay, and these are the common expressions. These are in your packet as well, but just to give you a little review. So again, habitual actions, los lunes, cada día, todos los días. These are showing that it's a habitual type of action. Antes, en el pasado, algunas veces, sometimes, siempre. These indicate siempre, for example, that it is a habitual action. A menudo, habitual action. Frecuentemente, con frecuencia. Notice all of them kind of dictating what kind of action it is. Okay, so generally speaking, usualmente, muchas veces, and then you have the word mientras, which means while. So also when you have two simultaneous actions in the past, I was reading while my sister was singing, both of those are going to be imperfect. So cantaba mientras yo estudiaba. All right, so those are all your key words for the imperfect, and I believe if you look in your packet, you'll see that on page 25 there is a little kind of like go-to study guide for you with all of these reasons and keywords on one page along with the endings for the imperfect and the preterite. Okay, so you have to do a little bit of studying in terms of which one goes with which, and obviously practice makes perfect, so if you need help or if you want to go over anything, please come to Extra Help and we'll go over it further. Okay, so the last thing before we finish off for today is the preterite tense. Okay, so the preterite tense, if you look, is a little bit different. Okay, so up until now, we were talking about the imperfect uses. The preterite uses you should have on page 21. There were 4 lines, and the 4 lines that you should have, it doesn't matter what order, would be actions that occurred at or for a specific amount of time. So if I say, I studied for 3 hours last night, I'm giving a specific amount of time of how long I studied. So that has to be in the preterite tense. Yo estudié por 2 horas. And you'll see that por 2 horas is like the indication of that specific amount of time. Okay, and that would have to be in the preterite tense. Then you have main actions or events in a story. So an action that happened once. So the boy ran. He came out of the house. So things that happen once. It's an event. It's going to be preterite tense. Also the beginning or end of an action. So it started to rain. You'd say empezó a llover. La clase terminó. Okay, so the words like that, to begin, empezar, terminar, those are usually going to be in the preterite tense, okay? Something can only start or end once. So it's that whole idea of a completed action in the past, okay? Did it happen once? Or the last thing also would be it's an action that's repeated a specific number of times. So if something is done, for example, you went to camp 3 times, in your lifetime, you could say the preterite tense, yo fui al campamento. Let me write this down here. Okay, so fui al campamento 3 veces. 3 veces. This 3 times is what makes it specific. So if it's a specific number of times, I have to use the preterite tense. It would not be iba, because if I say yo iba al campamento, I would have to make it a non-specific amount of times, because we don't know, how many times did you go? So that's really the difference between that preterite and imperfect. It can really change the meaning behind a sentence. All right, so let's take a look over here at some of the common expressions with the preterite tense. And again, you can find these on page 25 of your packet. You have things like el lunes pasado, a specific day, a specific time. El otro día, una vez, un día. Hoy, ayer, anoche, anteayer, por primera vez, esta mañana. Remember the suddenly transition words for interrupters. De repente, de pronto, por fin, finalmente. These are showing kind of like a conclusion of what happened. So these are all indicators of the preterite tense. Okay, and usually they will be used with a preterite tense verb. Okay, so that is the end of the preterite imperfect video. You can look back in your notes, go through page 25, see if you're understanding of all of the reasons, and see if, when you're creating your sentences or doing your homework, you can try to see when you would use one or the other. So the more practice you get, the better you will feel with this concept. It's a very tricky concept, so don't feel discouraged if it doesn't come to you in one session. It takes a long time to really perfect the reasons and really get to identify when you would use one over the other. Okay, so let's keep practicing in class, and we'll see each other soon. Bye.